A wave of armed uprisings has unexpectedly begun in Africa, pushing out Russian influence that the Kremlin has been building for many, many years. On April 25, coordinated attacks took place in the capital of Mali, Bamako, and several regions of the country, targeting military facilities that are directly connected to Russians. The point is that the local militia in Mali, known as the Tuaregs, I think you've heard this term before, and which has long opposed the Russian military presence in Mali, have entered active combat with the Russian African Corps, which came to the country to replace the Wagner PMC militants. And here's what's interesting. Back in 2024, it was reported that those very Tuaregs could be receiving military support from Ukrainian intelligence. I'm Alexei Pechi, let's discuss this together. But before we start, I'd ask you to subscribe to the channel, like this episode, leave any comment under this video, and also subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link is in the description of this video. So, Russian influence in Africa, which the Kremlin has been building for years, is now under serious threat. On April 25, in the capital of Mali, Bamako, and in several regions of the country, there were coordinated attacks on military facilities of the local junta and Russian troops. In particular, strikes targeted the largest army base in Kati, near the capital, where explosions occurred on the morning of April 25 and there was intense gunfire for several hours. Attacks were also reported in Kidal, Gao, Sevare and Mopti. In Bamako, that is, in the capital, the airport was temporarily closed, the streets were deserted, military helicopters circled over the city, and eyewitnesses reported gunfire everywhere and ongoing explosions. According to eyewitnesses, even the House of Defense Minister Sadio Kamara was destroyed. Interestingly, the Malian army stated that the attack was carried out by, quote, unidentified terrorist groups and assured that by midday the situation was already under control, although clearing operations were still ongoing. And according to Reuters sources, the group behind the attacks is Jama'at Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin, which is linked to Al-Qaeda and may have acted together with the Tuareg alliance, the Azawad Liberation Front. Those very Tuareg rebels, if you don't know who they are, let me explain now. The latter announced the capture of most of the city of Kidal, which is a former stronghold of the Tuareg rebels. And so, the city of Kidal, I suggest you remember it, we'll come back to it later, it's a key point in this story. Here, I should immediately explain why this topic is so important. For us, because you might say, listen, Africa, where is Mali? What does all this have to do with us? Why do we need this story? But actually in Mali there is a direct confrontation between Russia and Ukraine. Today, power in Mali is held by a military junta that came to power as a result of two coups in 2020 and 2021. The actual leader of the country now is General Assimi Goïta. He consolidated his power by dissolving political parties in 2025 and securing support to extend his rule until 2035. Although in 2021 he called himself a transitional leader. He said, "We are a transitional government for a short time." But it's obvious that Goïta and the junta wouldn't have managed on their own. Russia plays a key role here in ensuring the security and political stability of the current regime in Mali, having replaced France and Western partners. After the withdrawal of French troops and UN peacekeepers, the Malian junta invited the Russians, supposedly to fight Islamist groups. At first, these were Wagner Group mercenaries, and starting from 2025 they were replaced by the so-called Africa Corps, which reports directly to the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. In fact, these are Russian soldiers. But that turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg. Mali, along with Burkina Faso and Niger, joined the so-called Alliance of Sahel states, focusing on a close alliance with Moscow. And in all three countries, Russian militants helped the junta seize power. And now all these countries, together with Russia, are coordinating their positions at the United Nations and opposing Western influence. In return, Russia gets access to natural resources and also participates in major infrastructure and mining projects. Speaking of Mali, there is a lot of gold there, and the Russians are basically extracting this gold from Mali, in return helping the junta maintain its power by military means. And essentially, Assimi Goïta stays in power precisely thanks to Russian security forces, who protect government buildings and assist in operations against the rebels. But on the other hand, there are those very Tuareg rebels, and here it gets even more interesting. In July and August 2024, the Tuareg rebels in Mali dealt a heavy defeat to the Wagner PMC militants and government troops. And on the same day, or rather during the same period, the first reports appeared that the Tuaregs were being supported by Ukrainian intelligence, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, specifically to counter Russian influence. This incidentally led to Mali and Ukraine severing diplomatic relations. And here it's important to note that in July 2024, in the Tinzawaten area, those very Tuareg rebels destroyed a Wagner PMC convoy. They confirmed that they had information from Ukraine. Later, the Tuareg rebels confirmed contacts with Ukraine, stating that Ukrainian intelligence provided them with the necessary data for the attacks. Now, let's return to the city of Kidal. Right now, those very same Tuareg rebels are taking control there. This city is of key importance because in recent years, forces supporting the Malian junta have been stationed there, including Russian mercenaries from the African Corps of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. At the same time, on April 25th, the Tuaregs attacked the positions of those same Russians in the cities of Kati and Bamako. Experts call what happened the largest coordinated attack in recent years and a serious test for the regime led by Assimi Goïta. And what's important is that the authorities in Mali rely heavily on the Russian presence. But as you understand, the Russians themselves are already weakened because of the war in Ukraine. That's why it's also important for us to discuss and consider these events in Mali. Don't just dismiss it by saying it's far away in Africa. And I'll add one more story in this episode that's not related to Africa, but it is related to the decline of Russia's influence in the world. On the same day, April 25th, the European Space Agency dismantled the launch complex. 4 Russian Soyuz ST rockets at the Kourou Cosmodrome in French Guiana. Of course, this is not Africa, it's South America, but still. The 52-meter mobile service tower was destroyed by an explosion, and you are seeing this on your screens right now. The remaining infrastructure, including the assembly and testing complex, the railway, the liquid oxygen storage, and the fueling stations, they will be handed over to the startup Maya Space. This is a subsidiary of the French company Ariane Space, created to launch a new rocket. The first launch is scheduled for 2027. And I should note here that the 15-year-long cooperation between the European Space Agency and Roscosmos has come to an end. The cooperation in launching spacecraft into orbit was cut off due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2020. And that's when people in France realized, why should we cooperate with the Russians at all? Why do we need them? And that's when the company Maya Space was founded, which replaced the Russians. In March 2025, Maya Space signed its first commercial contract for Maya rocket launches for the French company Exotrail. In January 2026, an agreement was signed with Eutelsat for the launch of a OneWeb satellite. But today, the French have decided to finally get rid of the Russian legacy on their overseas territory. That's how Putin outplayed everyone again, both in Africa and in South America. Russians rejoice. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or a paid membership. You can find the links and payment details in the description of this video. It says there, support the Alexei Pichi channel. Choose any support option that's convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support you give to this channel. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.